Yeah, a couple meetings back, somebody mentioned something about zoo photography and going out and practicing at the zoo. We got a lot of birders in our group and wildlife people and stuff like that. So Steve, um, who I guess I can consider a friend of mine, we spent 5 days in luxurious Packwood, um, Washington, that's outside Mount Rainier. And also, I went out there last September and visited him. But anyway, how I got to know him was through Kelby One. I don't know how many people here are members of Kelby One and his education, but he did a class on zoo photography there. And I think it was what, maybe a month later, you did a image critique, a blind photo image critique on his weekly, I guess, what is it, podcast or what do you call it? Webcast, The Grid. And I ended up entering 3 photos into it. And he actually critiqued 3 of my bear photos, which I'll still never forget. Why did I go black and white? I still don't know why I went black and white, but I did. Um, but anyway, which anyway, so we got to, he critiqued my photos, and later on, we were part of a Facebook group with Rick Salmon and got to talking, and yeah, and here we are. And I figured this would be a great speaker. Um, like Dave said earlier, to go out and, and Steve too, you get a new camera or you're going on a major trip, um, you know, go practice at your zoos. Oh, and I forgot, he also was part of the one of the first Kelby Live conferences, wildlife conference. And you
And I
did a
used
class.
one of your photos because I didn't have, I wanted to show the bear catching a fish, and I used yours.
Yes, and I believe it was one of them that you critiqued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So without further ado, Steve Gotz, and he can go into some more detail about himself. And
Okay. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start my PowerPoint presentation, share that with you, so that I don't forget to say anything I meant to say. And all I have to do now is figure out how to do what I want to do, which is share a screen. And I think it's this one.
Are those lions on your couch?
Yes, I'll tell you that story. Share. So, okay, you are screen sharing. This is the application. Hopefully, you're seeing the right one because I've got it up in 2 different places. Anyway, so I teach the art of zootography. What happened was I've been a member of Kelby One for many, many years. You are seeing my screen, right, with the Jaguar? Okay,
yes,
good. So they had a beginning uh, backyard photography class, and they had the how to go on safari class, and they didn't have anything in between. And I said, well, I've been doing this for a while, so let's talk about how that came about. I purchased my first digital video camera in 2001. I had been goofing off too much on the computer. I thought, well, I'll do something more constructive with my time, and we were getting ready to go on a trip to Italy, and so I bought one of the very first digital video cameras. Should have bought a still camera. Didn't realize that at the time, but I bought a video camera. Came back, didn't know how to edit, but I tried all these different programs. I got into Adobe Premiere, which turned into Premiere Pro, and when they needed somebody to teach it for lynda.com, if you remember lynda.com, it's now part of LinkedIn Learning. When Premiere Pro first came out, the first version didn't have a number. I taught version 1.5 in 2004. Well, fast forward about 9 years, and I took this picture with my cell phone and went, you know, that's not terrible. I wonder what I could do with a real camera. Now, I know now how stupid that sounds, but at the time I had no idea that, you know, it's more about composition and subject and all this, you know, it's not the camera. There's nothing wrong with a cell phone camera if you want everything in focus. But anyway, so I ended up going out and I bought a Panasonic GH3, the Micro Four Thirds camera, because it would shoot good HD with no 29-minute limit. And I thought, well, I'll take some stills with it. We were going on vacation. And so I decided I would just shoot stills to get used to all these different new lenses I had. Well, I fell in love with shooting stills. You don't have to wait for anything to move. You just take the picture. And then it's raw, so now you can process the thing. This is great. This is so much easier than video. So much better. You can do so much more. So fast forward a couple of years, when I retired, I decided to buy the Nikon D750 because I thought I needed a full frame camera. Once again, that's a stupid reason to buy the camera. But fortunately, years later, I'm still using it and I still like it. So, but then I added a Nikon D500 for what I hope are the right reasons. Just recently, after I came home from that little jaunt with Steve at Mount Rainier, I was so exhausted. From carrying around all that heavy gear, I bought, oh, it says Olympus. I wrote that twice. It's the Olympus OM Mark III, M1 Mark III. It's 54% of the weight of the gear I used to carry. The D500 plus the 200 to 500 lens is almost twice the weight of this 100 to 400 on the Olympus, which, because it's Micro Four Thirds, is actually gives me just a little bit more apparent reach. Anyway, but I was saying I taught the art of zootography for Kelby One in 2019. Got to be on their webcast, which was a lot of fun. The thing is I'm still not a particularly great photographer. I'm very well published, but I'm not a great photographer. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about how I make all these great pictures, because they're okay, but I've seen other people and went, well, yeah, okay. So let's talk about what is zootography. Well, mostly it's the art of photographing captive animals in a way that appears as though they were out in the wild in their native habitat. But there's a lot more to it than that. I started going to the zoo because when I retired, I knew I was going to need more exercise, and the Oakland Zoo was very hilly. I also needed something to point my camera at. And let me tell you that there's always something to point your camera at a zoo. It just is. It may not be the shots you went to go get, but there's always something. So, and when I say zoo, by the way, I mean zoos, wildlife parks, safari parks, animal sanctuaries, you name it. Anywhere where the animal is not roaming free. You know, there's even a zoo photography Facebook page that specifically says, no, this is only for captured animals. No wildlife, no real wild, no birds out in the wild, no none of that. This has to be zoo stuff. So in the Austin area, I looked it up. You've got your Austin Zoo, the capital of Texas Zoo, the Natural Bridge Wildlife Ranch sounds like a lot of fun. The Animal World and Snake Farm Zoo sounds like a lot of fun. And, you know, then there's even more within a bit of a drive. So you guys have a lot of fun stuff you can go do. Anyway, I retired from telecom in 2015. I immediately bought a membership to the Oakland Zoo, and my wife was so happy I wasn't hanging around the house all the time. I was out of the house 5 days a week, and she was still working, so I was home on weekends for her. You know, you got to do all the honeydew lists and all that, but 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I was gone. I was at the zoo. It was 10 minutes away. It was great. And you know, it's basically free. There's no parking fee there, so for members. So you just go in, spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and leave, and you didn't spend any money. Well, I finally found somebody at the zoo that was interested in my photos after a few months. After a while, I thought, gee, I'm getting pretty decent at it. I needed to show it. So I would ask people who would be interested in photos, and nobody came up with a name for me. And finally, I was showing somebody photos on a phone, and the director of marketing was standing right next to them. And she went crazy over my photos, and she's been a dear friend ever since, but she really likes my photos. So they asked me to become an official volunteer because my zoo is an AZA zoo, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and which is the top level of accreditation for zoos. But to get into their annual calendar, you have to be either an official volunteer or an employee. So they made me an official volunteer. It was the first official volunteer that marketing had ever had, but the education department took me in and did that. Now, standing around talking about the animals while I was taking photos upset a lot of the docents because I am guilty of a lot of anthropomorphism. If you're familiar with anthropomorphism, it's attributing human emotions and reactions to animals, and it really upsets certain people, especially the docents who were taught never to do it. So anyway, I took the docent classes and did that. But the cool part was, with my picture on a membership card, I knew that there were thousands of people carrying my picture around their wallet. I just thought that was just amazing. And this bird behind this screen here, by the way, is the picture, or you'll see it a bit later, I think, too. Is the picture on the first card. The zoo uses my photos for everything nowadays, and we'll talk about that. I moved to Arizona in November of 2020, and then there's a tax initiative coming up in November for the city of Oakland to help pay for the zoo. So the marketing person had a photographer come in and take a few pictures for her, and she just wasn't happy. So they flew me out, put me up in a hotel, paid me my day rate for a couple of days, and I took all the pictures they needed. It was pretty interesting for me because I got to go behind the scenes to all the places that they thought of as subpar that they wanted money to help fix up. So what are the types of photographs to shoot at the zoo? Well, the obvious one is this: animals in what appears to be their native habitat, right? I love this photo. It was not a long exposure. It just was a really quiet day on the lake. There's also animals interacting with a human artifact, especially the human artifacts like the one the bear and the otter are with, which is something that the zookeepers went to a lot of trouble to make. They make them out of old fire hoses, which are, they can withstand a lot of biting and tearing and pulling. And so we get donations, most zoos do get donations from fire departments for old hoses go to stuff like this. The zookeepers love to see these photos. I mean, they worked really hard on that swing. And, for them to see this picture, they just love it. You've got animals in their native habitat, animals with a human artifact, then you have animals interacting with humans. I went in to take headshots of, which we'll talk about in a minute. I took headshots of all the education staff and the volunteers and the zookeepers. And some of the people in the education staff said, can we bring our animals in? It's like, I so badly wanted to shoot animals. I was just never had the nerve to ask to bring animals into a studio. Well, I set up a studio in a classroom, and I just love this picture. I had to ask her for a model release for it because I just use it all the time. It's just, I love it. But then, you know, zookeepers don't get paid very much money. I will just tell you that they don't get paid much. And so when you can catch a picture of them doing what they love to do, training a grizzly bear, training a mountain lion, giving a big old 150-year-old tortoise a bath, they just love these. I actually, I had a picture of this young lady. You could see more of her bathing the. I don't have a model release for it, but I had a picture of her bathing this tortoise, and the marketing said, "Oh, great, we can use that to advertise our car wash." And I'm thinking, what? And I really, okay, so they did. They used it to advertise the car wash. You know, it's like, hey, if we treat the tortoises like this, think what we'll do with your car. Hey, it was silliness, but hey. And I should tell you, zookeepers are silly. You live in Austin, so you have some experience with some Spanish, whether it's fluent or Spanglish or whatever. There's a bobcat in the Phoenix Zoo. You want to guess what the bobcat's name might be? Roberto Gatto. Zookeeper humor. Okay, so I love to see, you know, the animals interacting with humans. Some of them you have to stay separate from. Some of them, the snake here needed to go out for a bit of a sunshine. It had eaten a couple of days before. They needed to take it out and let it go on the ground and let it run around for, well, slither around for a while. The picture on the right is that lemur, that blue-eyed black lemur, passed away shortly after this. And the zookeeper said this was the only picture she had of them together. And when I gave it to her, it made her cry. And it's like, okay, when you can make somebody cry, they're so happy to receive a gift. Yeah, you're doing something right with your photography. Then, you know, sometimes you just shoot the people. She is slinging food up and over the fence to the grizzly bears. So, and you can see there's a large crowd behind her looking through a glass wall so they're looking at the grizzlies. The Oakland Zoo has 2 grizzlies and 2 coastal browns. The guy on the left was the head of the zoo. The lady on the right, when they brought the bison, the Indian tribe from Montana brought bison to us to breed, and then after the calves get to be about 2 years old, they go back and go into a semi-wild herd. So we're helping reproduce and increase the herd of purebred bison, as opposed to those who have bovine, cow DNA, cattle DNA. And is she gorgeous? You can just look at her and go, she dresses like that all the time. You know, that's not a costume for her. So there are different events where you can shoot people. One of these pumpkins is not the same as the other, if you look closely. The pregnant young lady who painted her belly. Thought that was pretty funny. She was one of the winners of the contest. This was one of those things where there was an event, and the lady is the mayor of the city of Oakland, and I wanted to get into the city of Oakland and get paid to take headshots of all the staff and all that. And this was an opportunity for me. Nobody at this zoo was going to stop me from walking right up and crouching down in the front row and taking the pictures. They just, after a while, I became, quote unquote, that photographer guy. I was the photographer, so nobody ever questioned anywhere I went or anything I wanted to do. So I got to take pictures. The guy on the right's the head of a major hospital corporation. Okay, these are not good pictures, but these are the ones where you take them and go, oh, shoot, I should have knelt down. I should have gotten lower. I should have done a better job because she's just that cute. And the family was just that cute. And I should have knelt down. And I didn't. Shame on me. Shame on me. Shame on me. But still, it was fun. So, to take pictures, you walk up to people and say, the zoo would like to have your photograph for this and that and the other thing. Now, I don't sell photos like this, obviously. I don't have model releases, but I can give them to the zoo and they can use them for anything. I also take headshots. Now, I have to warn you, this is a volunteer thing, okay? I have been paid by the zoo for various jobs, but most of this work is volunteer. So I volunteered to take headshots because I was studying with Peter Hurley on the art of the headshot and thought, well, the problem is these people are the least vain people I have ever met in my life. They come in, they got poop on them, they've got animal vomit, they've got straw in their hair. I've got a full-length mirror right there. They don't use it. They don't care. They just come in, they say, take my picture. It's the end of a long day, but they're some of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. And the advantage, of course, in taking and volunteering to do this is that then they all knew me as the photographer guy, and I would get special privileges. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool. We'll talk about special privileges in a bit. I also took architecture, construction photos, things like that they can put in their social media and in newsletters. These pictures all went out in a newsletter to major donors who are helping to pay for this stuff. Then there's plant or local exotic plant or even local plant life. Most zoos, a lot of them are also, what's the word I'm looking for, where they have all the flowers? My brain is on hold. But anyway, there's a lot of different.
Century plant?
No, it's not that. Anyway, a place where you go to see a lot of flowers and plants and
botanical garden.
Botanical garden.
Yeah, a botanical garden. Most of them have all these different plants, and so it's always fun to be able to take the shots. Nothing spectacular about this if you're in Hawaii, but at the zoo you can get these shots. Then there's food. Well, they needed somebody to shoot the food at the new cafe, so they just assumed I could do it. So I went on to Kelby 1, took a couple of classes in food, went over to Creative Live, took another class on how to photograph food, and I shot food. That's the pizza on the left. The right-hand side was at an event. And I get hungry just looking at them. But the lower right, those are cannoli, like in The Godfather. It's like, leave the gun, take the cannoli. So I took the cannoli. I especially like being asked to do scientific studies. So this was an exercise in how smart sun bears really are and how fast they can learn. So they made increasingly harder and harder puzzles for the bears to figure out how to get their honey or whatever. And the harder the puzzle, the more the food was something that they really, really had a high value. They really, really wanted it. Turns out they love avocado. Who knew? And that young lady is the one who was doing the master's thesis. And so she used my photos throughout. What was fun is that because I knew exactly when the animals were going to be out, I was also able to get a video of all of them doing all this stuff, and the zoo was able to use those videos on their Facebook page, which was fun. Then there's special requests. Okay, like I said, it's not every day that you get asked to take a pretty girl down to the compost pile and have her hold it for a pamphlet on conservation. Okay. Makes sense though, right? But they needed the photo, so I took the photo. This one, so they came to me and they said, do you have any pictures of Mama Bear up in her tree? I said, no. How long do I have? And I could tell they wanted it for something. So it could, just by the way they asked. So on the first day, I looked, Mama wasn't in the tree. The second day, Mama wasn't in the tree. The third day, Mama's way up at the top of the tree, balancing on this three-pointed stamp she's got. I have no idea how an 800-pound bear, 700, 800 pounds at the time, is on a branch like that. But she was up so high, I didn't have to shoot through the glass. I didn't have to shoot for the fencing. I walked across the way, used a 500 millimeter lens, and captured her just like this. And they used this for, they had a fundraiser and they wanted to give an award to the woman who put them over the top. Told you, zookeeper humor, you know, over the top, top of the tree, Mama Bear. Anyway, so I was able to get that shot. One of my favorites. It's trimmed down a little bit. It is the lock screen on my phone. So I've been asked by Animal Care to take photos of wolf puppies for their identification purposes. You know, they need pictures of them to be able to tell who's who, stuff like that. I got invited to go into the quarantine area in the vet hospital to shoot mountain lions while they were still under quarantine. I got to go behind the black bear exhibit to take a photo with San Francisco in the background for San Francisco Magazine. Also went into Sunset Magazine when the art director changed magazines. So then there's this photo. So I'm walking by the baboon exhibit. I'm walking down the main path and off to the right, you know, there's a path that goes to see the baboons. And I see 4 or 5 young female zookeepers. When I say young, they're probably 21 to 25. And they were giggly and excited. And I heard one of them say, I wish I had my camera. So here I am with my full frame camera with a 200 to 500 lens mounted on it. It's like, okay, Stephen to the rescue. What can I do for you? And I look over and this male baboon is hugging this older female baboon. And they were just all agog. They were so happy because the female's buddy had passed away, her best girl who'd been around for 30 years or something. And so this younger male has taken over responsibility for comforting this other baboon. And so I gave them all, I came by with 4x6 prints for them. You know, you just get them done at Walmart, Walgreens, something. You know, I just went and I got some prints and I gave them to them, and they said, "Can we have bigger ones for our wallpaper, for our Windows wallpaper?" Like, oh, sure. So I went around to every computer to figure out what size photo or what size screen they had, what the resolution was, and I gave them all. So they, for I don't know, it must have been about a year, they all had that as their wallpaper. Sometimes there's just shots you have to take. Y'all watch baseball, and you ever seen the managers or the coaches just sort of hanging out over the dugout, watching the game? So I posted this on a San Francisco webpage, and said that, remind you anybody, because they have a coach who does that. And the answer was, nah, the bear's awake. So I thought, well, okay. So that's the big mama bear there. She's my favorite. Sometimes there's just those photos that make people say, ah. So I call them awe shots. It's like you show that to people and they go, ah, isn't that fun? Is it a great photo? No. You know, but it's peak of action, so to speak, right? Anyway, So I didn't bother to clean it up a lot because it is what it is. Mama's having lunch and baby's having lunch. So why the zoo? Well, as I said, there's always something to point your camera at. And the thing is you can experiment with something that's always going to be there. You can come back day after day and experiment with different lenses, different cameras. You can try different times a day, all kinds of different stuff, and feel like you're going to get more out of a lens if you really push it, and then go try another lens and push it. And so I really like being at the zoo. Besides that, if you don't get any pictures, you were still at a zoo. Yeah, it was a nice day, right? So you were at the zoo. This shot is another one that made a membership card. Now this one, excuse me, this one's extremely hard to get. The glass is about 4 inches thick. And we'll talk about shooting through glass later. But this is one of the few good pictures I've ever taken through that glass. Unfortunately, the fencing, you can't get close enough to the fencing to get a shot of these guys, no matter how far they are away. It just you can't. We'll talk about that in a bit. Sometimes it's who you know, or who knows you. I sat for, I don't know, it must have been 4 or 5 hours talking to this bird, singing to this bird, come on, fly. He would start to take off. He'd flap his wings, he'd poop, and you think, okay, he's about to take off. No, and he settled back down. And finally, a zookeeper came by, heard me sing, and come fly with me to this bird. And to shut me up, she threw a dead rat at me. It hit the fence about the time the bird took off to come get it. Unfortunately, it looks like the bird's flipping me off, doesn't it? Unfortunately, when you're shooting through fencing, you're shooting wide open. I got his feet in focus, but his head is not. But you know what? That's just the way it goes. I haven't tried Topaz Sharpen AI on that one yet. Maybe I will one of these days. I was also asked to do a scientific study. I had to take pictures of all 4 of the eagles, and they specifically wanted pictures of the damage to their nose from flying into to their beak from flying into the fence until they got used to where they were living. So I found that really interesting. But I look at this guy and I go, this is not a happy animal. This guy's pissed. Now that's anthropomorphism. Okay, to assign a pissed off attitude to a bird like that, you have no idea what that bird's thinking. It's probably just hungry. So sometimes photos are just cute. You'll see another picture of these guys a couple of years younger, but I just love the expression on 3 different expressions on the brothers' faces. Now, I'm going to tell you that background was replaced because there was chain link fence. And who wants chain link fence in your shot? So I cheated. Can't really tell too much, but I mean, if you thought about it, you might. But if you're thinking about my background, then the rest isn't a very good picture. There she is again, balanced up in a 3-point stance. And I have no idea how she does that. These 2 had just finished mating. I was going to show that picture, and my wife looked over my shoulder and said, "Don't you do that." So these 2 just finished mating, and you'll see the results of that mating in a little bit. Sometimes you make a mistake. I messed up the white balance, and I looked at it and I went, you know what? I'm leaving it like that. I just left it like that. I left it golden. I named that one "What the Light Reveals." Yeah, there's a whole lot more shadow than there is the light, but it's just, there's so many ways to play with pictures. And you're guaranteed to take at least a few good pictures when you go to the zoo. May not be a lot, but how many do you need to play with? This guy, he made it into the national calendar, as well as one of the other ones I'll show you in a minute. But this is in the AZA calendar for 2019. Making it into the calendar, besides just knowing that every zoo in the, just about every zoo in the country, every good zoo, is going to have your picture up on their wall for the entire month of June. For some reason, I got June both times, which is the centerfold. So it's just nice to know that all those people are looking at your photo. It kind of just gives you a little oomph, to say, I think I'll just continue. Baby bison are fun to photograph. They don't need, you really don't need a good reason to shoot babies. It's just human babies, animal babies, you name it. It's just fun. Okay, so I took this picture of the bear, and they decided they were going to put it on a 10-foot long banner, which was great, except there was hay on his rear end. And so they told me, and I don't normally doctor up the pictures until they tell me they're going to use this. They said, "Oh, we're going to use this one." I said, "Wait, please, just give me a few minutes. I just want to take the hair off his butt, or the hay off his butt." So she let me do that, and they put this. You'll see that banner in a minute. River otters. This one, I was just having fun trying to get a good picture of them, and this one ended up on the sign that's outside their exhibit now. So, talk about zoos. Modern zoos exist for the purpose of education, teaching conversation, conservation, zoology, biology, etc., and to support worldwide conservation efforts. These are not circuses. They don't teach the animals to do tricks. They treat them extremely well. The Oakland Zoo in particular has a multi-million-dollar hospital. I think it's a $32 million veterans hospital, veterinarian hospital. Whenever a mountain lion in California is caught up because its mother was hit by a car or whatever, or it's emaciated, dehydrated, whatever, the Oakland Zoo is the one who takes them in and tries to fix them up and send them off to other zoos. Mostly they're so young, they've never learned to hunt for themselves. So you can't release them. I mean, you really can't teach a mountain lion to hunt. It takes another mountain lion to do that. And you can't just put them out there with some strange mountain lion. So they act as ambassadors to the natural world, especially, in big cities where the kids don't go out and see animals every day. They're not out roaming around in the streets of New York or Dallas or Phoenix or whatever. I mean, yeah, sure, in my neighborhood we get coyotes and mountain lions and the occasional bear, but we're up here in the mountains. So there's some rules to photography. Everybody knows there's rules to photography. The rule of thirds, nonsense. Those aren't rules. These are rules. These are the rules I live by. If your photos aren't interesting enough, go somewhere more interesting. And I've added, and be patient. Okay, so these are the same three lions. They're 22 months old. They're their first day on exhibit. So the newspapers are there, the magazines are there, the TV stations are there, even the radio stations are there. And they all took their photos. And, one of the lions would be sitting up and the other two would be laying down and they'd be facing different directions or what. So you've heard the phrase F8 and be there? Well, I had my camera set. I stood in a corner as far back out of the way. I zoomed in and I just kept my camera on them for 4 hours. And finally, somebody on the other side of a wall behind me decided it was time to wash down a platform with the hose. that hose hit some fiberglass, and all 3 lions went, huh, what? And looked my way. And I got my shot. That shot has also been in the national calendar. It was in Photoshop User Magazine. They use it for all kinds of different things at the zoo, have for years. If you're, rule 2, another one I like. If your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So I found myself zooming into animal faces all the time because I find faces really interesting. Then, of course, I had a revelation that people had faces. So I studied the art of the headshot with Peter Hurley. I don't know if you've heard of Peter, but he's like the headshot guy pretty much. And he likes to teach, and he has an organization that he uses to help teach. So I started taking headshots of people, but I love shooting close up into animals, and this fella here made it onto a membership card. He was my first one. Like I said, the bears were on a membership card. I call this the good, the bad, and the ugly. Joe McNally. Everybody know who Joe McNally is? So he told me at a Photoshop World back in 2017, he said, shooting at zoos is fun, but they will crop the heck out of your stuff. They'll just crop it any old which way. They don't care. And I said, yeah, I'm aware, because let me tell you this, folks. If you don't provide them great photos, they will just use inferior photos. They're more than happy to have your great photos, but if they can't get a great photo, they'll just use whatever. They don't care. It's just a photo to them because it's the animals that are important. To us, yes, the animals are important to me too, but I want good photographs. So the crop for the membership card, I did. The crop for the banner, I did. The crop for the barrier up in the upper right, I didn't do that, and they trimmed it a little close, but at least they didn't destroy the photo. It wasn't terrible with the bear, but they sort of got a little close to the nose. They got a little close to crop this. On the left-hand side, that's a sticker that they give out to kids. The elephant in the right, I cropped it that way, so that's not a problem. And they only cropped the wolf a little bit, not too bad. The TV station used the picture as is. In the upper right is one where they invited me to come into the hospital to shoot the goat. And the only lens I had with me that day was the 200 to 500. And I couldn't get far enough away to get the whole goat in. So they disguised that fact with 2 other pictures I had taken. I just couldn't get the whole goat in, but that's the best they could do. But still, it's not a bad crop. That and my favorite elephant shot down there. The zookeepers were throwing food into her mouth, and she was just very happy. So I like the way they've used these photos. But then there's the bad. Those are horrible crops. The print is not enough contrast. They just, if they'd have only let me know what they were going to do before they did it, I might have, heavily increased the contrast, sharpened them quite a bit, but they just, I showed them the picture and they said, oh yeah, we'll just use these, and didn't even let me know. Came in to volunteer one day, and there they were.
Looks like they scanned a print.
Say again?
It looks like they scanned in a print.
Yeah, or something. No, it's just really cheap paper. Is what it is. They just did a lousy job. What can I tell you? Okay, so all maps are vertical like this. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't spend a lot of time holding my camera vertically. I've learned to now, but at that time, I really hadn't learned to go vertical a lot. Now with the way people are with phones and all that, yeah, you know, vertical shots are a lot more popular than they used to be. So, but there were these wolves, and when they saw the picture I took of the wolves, they went absolutely crazy. Mind you, the holders for these maps are vertical. But this map, they just had to use that photo. And it's like, I'll tell you the story about this photo in a minute. But I was very happy, but you know, they just had to put it in there sideways, that's all. Okay, this is the ugly. So there are two chain link fences at 90-degree angles from each other, and I'm trying to shoot through them to see some lions that have not yet been put out on exhibit. So I'm getting shots like this, pretty common. Oh, well, what can you do? And then I managed to get that, which isn't horrible, just not good. That's not a good photo. I mean, it's a snapshot, right? Really. I mean, I did my best, but it's just not. So I showed it to the marketing director and said, hey, I can't wait till I get better photos of these guys when they're actually out on exhibit. And she sent it to the TV station. So it was seen all over the Bay Area, and it's just, and with my name plastered. I was like, oh God, please. Anyway, so, but I eventually managed to get that, right? That's the shot. So that was, like I said, made it in the Photoshop User Magazine and the National Calendar and all that stuff. And they use it a lot more. So then there's this. Now, this was before Topaz denoise, so I haven't tried Topaz denoise on it, but this is a wolf. I'm probably at over 50,000 ISO, and it's still too dark. And it's just a little wolf pup down underneath a tree where, you know, you can just see another wolf pup up to the right of it. And I showed it to marketing and said, do not use this photo. She said, well, if we don't have something in the next couple of days, I'm going to use whatever we got. It's like, oh my God, oh my God. I got lucky and I got that. I had been assigned another task. Mom was there feeding them. They were nursing, and then Mom wandered away. And they looked my way. Now, they had just started learning about solid food. The little one eating the rock is not quite clear on the subject of solid food quite yet. So that's the best I could do. That was a lot of fun. But somebody, you know, said they're out, and I went running. I don't know, must have ran half a mile to get to where they were. So my favorite Ansel Adams quote: "A good photograph is knowing where to stand." Well, to me, that has two meanings. The spot the photographer chooses to stand, or crouch, or lay down, or, you know, stretch and do it, whatever. But it's also your perspective. And from my perspective, shooting at the zoo is to help entice people to go visit your local zoo, or to learn more about your cameras by shooting animals at a zoo before you go out and spend a whole lot of money on a safari or the trip to the Galapagos or wherever you're going to go. You know, I mean, Carol, you travel a lot, but do you ever go shoot wildlife for zoos when you're out and about? Some people do. So I think that my work has helped get more people to zoo. And if I think that, then I'm just going to keep going to zoos. So let's talk about gear for a minute. First of all, how much longer do I have, Stephen?
Just keep going.
Okay, so let's talk about gear. Does it matter? Sure, it matters. When you're shooting through fencing, gear matters. When shooting animals at the back of the habitat, it matters when you're shooting little creatures up close and you need a macro lens. Yeah, it matters. And gear matters if you're trying to get a particular shot. But no, it doesn't really matter what camera you have with you if you concentrate on taking photos that are appropriate to the gear you have in your hand. I have one lens days where I'll bring one camera, one lens, and I'll go out and I'll shoot with that. So does it get really frustrating when there's something that I can't take a photo of because my lens is too long or too short or not fast enough or what? Yeah, sure, it gets a little bit, but I know that because it's a zoo, it'll be there another day. And then I go with maybe, because you see something that, does gear matter? Well, if it really bothers you that you're out there and you can't get the shot you want, carry two cameras with two lenses, or But I've gotten old and lazy, and I just shoot with one nowadays. So, rule number 2 about getting close enough. So one day in 2020, I was asked if I had particulars of a little girl baboon from November of 2015, because they were sending her and her mother down to San Diego to mate with a male down there that didn't have any females. So I went through in the first couple of weeks of November of 2015, I saw these shots and they were like, okay, they're not great. They're just, mediocre. And then I got to the 16th and it was like, holy, whoa, what happened? All of a sudden, these shots are so much better. What happened? And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's when I got my longer lens. That's when I stopped shooting that exhibit with a 70-200 and started shooting with a 200 to 500. Now, once again, this was before gigapixel AI, but still, it was much easier to take the better shots. And so all the pictures I sent were after the 16th of November. So gear does matter a little bit. Weather matters. If you're shooting through fencing, really dark animals, overcast is your friend. I don't know how many days you get overcast in Austin, but we don't get many here in the Phoenix area. Got a lot in Oakland. So overcast is almost always your friend, except when it isn't. Like lions like to stick their nose into the sun to get a regal pose. Isn't that a regal pose? They just like to stick their nose towards the sun. So an overcast day doesn't really help. But if you want to shoot something that's moving fairly quickly and you want to ensure that it stays in focus, you might want a faster shutter speed and stop down your aperture a little bit. So sunshine's your friend, or your ISO is going to get really high. Now, keeping in mind that ISO is not as important as it once was. Now you can post-process, but I really like to get things in camera as much as possible. Noting that raising the ISO on a sunny day, I mean, if you're shooting in the sun and you just want to shoot really fast, like, went over 2,000, raising your ISO to 1,600 or 4,000, that just doesn't matter. I mean, it's not gonna create noise in a photo in the sunshine. In the shadows, maybe, but not in the sunshine. So the weather will often determine when you go to the zoo what you're going to shoot that day. I mean, whenever I would wake up in the morning, it was an overcast day, I knew I was going straight to the chimpanzees or straight to the jaguar, where I could shoot through the fencing and not have any sun on the fencing. This is not photoshopped. If I had photoshopped it, I would have burned or darkened the greenery around his legs a little bit. I saw the light. I saw the lion. I saw the path the lion was going to take, and I waited for the lion to walk into the sunshine. That's the advantage of going back to the same place over and over again, and you know the animal, and you know where he's going, and you can see the light, and I really like that photo. It just, it's a proper white balance. It was just late in the day, and there you go. So these aren't horrible photos, but his on the left-hand side, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but on the left-hand side, his eye is casting a shadow on his snout. It's like, well, okay, but that's not really what you want. And on the right-hand side, well, you know, one side's in shade and the other's not. But if you can walk around, or if you know what time of day and where the sun is going to be in relationship to where animals are, then you can get, yes, it's a flatter light, but there's no shadows on it. Not the best example, but it'll do. I mean, there's a shadow on his neck, but. So time of day kind of matters. You want to, maybe if you're going to go to the same zoo over and over again, keep a log of what time you saw which animal, you know, and what the weather was. Best time to photograph an animal is often around the meal times, just before, during, or just after. I love pictures of animals eating, not the ones eating hay as much as the ones eating meat. That's kind of more interesting. But my rule number 3, if you see a zookeeper with food for the animals, follow them. You know, just ask them, which exhibit are you heading to, or who's the food for? Because you know, you're going to see those animals. They're not going to be sleeping. They're going to be out. So there are places where midday sun doesn't play a part, right? So, you know, if you go in the morning and it starts to get really sunny, then, you know, then you do the indoor exhibits, or the animals that hang out in the shade anyway, or if you have underwater exhibits. So, okay, I was asked to get pictures of 3 tigers all in the same approximate pose. They wanted the head facing me, the camera, or almost to the camera, but they wanted to see some of the side of the animal. So there was this path they would walk from about 2:45 to 3:30 in the afternoon, because they ate at 3:30 and they don't have watches. So they only know they're getting hungry. So they would pace, and they would walk around, and they would look in the kitchen window, and then they'd come and they'd sit down for a while, and they'd lick their paws, and then they'd walk around a bit, and then they'd go over and they look to see if the food was there yet, and that wasn't there. So then they would go play with their sister or get in the pool, and then they'd come back out, and they would walk this path. It took me about a month to get 4 pictures of each tiger that would be appropriate for this sign. So these signs are, I don't know, 4 foot by 6 foot up on the, and until an animal passes away, those signs are going to be there, because the zoo is too cheap to buy new signs very often. So it was pretty cool, is to know my animals are up there. So there's quite often fencing or some sort of mesh between you and animals that you want to photograph. So these 2 shots were taken about 2 feet from each other. The one on the left, the sun was on the black mesh. I moved 2 feet to my right where a tree had shaded the mesh, and with the exact same settings, without changing anything on the camera, that's what I got, shooting through the shade. Okay? So it's really important to avoid sunshine on your fences. Okay? Now, when the sun is on the other side of the fence, you're pretty much stuck, and then you can do. But sometimes you'll see that there's a telephone pole or a pole holding something else, and you can go over there and you can take the picture through that little bit of shade. It makes all the difference in the world. I'm sitting here talking with my hands, by the way. So you're looking at my screen and I'm talking with my hands. So that's one of the best tips I can give you. Avoid a barrier with sun on it, look for a shady spot. Shoot wide open. I mean, as wide open as you can, and zoom all the way in, because the longer the focal length and the wider, you know, the faster your lens, the smaller the depth of field. And if that depth of field is far enough away from that fence, it's going to cut through it like butter. This tiger was shot with a micro 4/3 camera, which are not a full frame, not even a crop sensor, but a 2x crop. which means it has a pretty deep depth of field, whether you like it or not. Okay, you don't get a blurry background with a camera like that. But I was about 3 feet from the fence, leaning over I wasn't not leaning over far enough to get myself into trouble. And she was about 20 feet from the fence. And I was able to shoot through that fence with no problem. And by the way, if you do get a little bit, dehaze in Lightroom or Photoshop will help quite often get rid of that last little bit of haze that comes from shooting through fencing. So get as close to the fencing as you're allowed without getting into trouble. Don't step over any barriers, and be much closer to the fence than the animal is. So people don't understand. I'm trying to take a picture, and it's like, dude, go to the back of the exhibit, back up. Don't come visit me. Go to the back of the exhibit. I'm talking to the animals. People think I'm nuts. Telling them to back up. No, I want them to come close. No, go farther away so I can get your picture. So how do you choose the right lens? Let's say you've been at the zoo a couple of times. There's one animal you want to take a picture of. So you have all your gear and you have to decide what you want to shoot it with. So at the Oakland Zoo, my favorite Jaguar is best shot at about 300 millimeters at f2.8. Well, I had a 70-200 lens at f2.8. I could crop in, but I kind of want to get it right in camera. Or do you shoot the 500 millimeter with a 200 to 500 millimeter lens at f5.6, which still gets you cutting through the fencing like butter, but now you don't get the whole animal in the shot because your lens is too big. So, and if you back off to 300 millimeter, all of a sudden the fence starts to show up. So what do you do? Because remember I said that depth of field is based on your f-stop and the focal length. So this is one way to do it. That's a 70-200, and I just cropped in. This Jaguar, by the way, doesn't trust me, and he keeps an eye on me whenever I'm around with that camera. He won't even take a drink without keeping his eye on me. Then I shot it with a 200 to 500. Well, now I'm too close. Once again, different day, still keeping an eye on me. And so you have to make those decisions. So I kept telling my wife, I wish they would just make a 100 to 300. I don't want to carry around multiple lenses. If they would just make a 100 to 300 f2.8, I'd buy it. And then they did. Well, it's a 120 to 300. And it was $9,500. And I told my wife, and she looked at me with that look that women give you when you're being silly, And then when Kobe Bryant died in that helicopter accident, and we were talking about, it had been a couple of months since I talked about the lens. We were talking about how short life is. She looks at me and says, go buy your lens. I believe I had the presence of mind to sit there and chat with her for another 20 minutes before I ran off and bought it. So I don't use it much, but boy, it's great at zoos. It's really great at zoos. But it did make me buy a monopod because it is a heavy beast. It's 120 to 300 f2.8 is a heavy beast, 7.1 pounds. So that's the discussion: is do you take the picture on the left, you take the picture on the right? Well, that's for you to decide. Unless you can get the exact right lens at f2.8 that you want, or less. But sometimes, hey, this one's uncropped, and it just worked out. That the animal decided to stay in the right place at the right time on a shady day. Another fencing trick for mesh or chain link. So I'm shooting through. You can kind of see the mesh. I didn't bother to clean it up. You can see the chain link fence, or the black mesh, I guess it is, around the bird. So here's the problem. Have you ever noticed that when you look through, if you look through a fence, let's say you centered this bird right directly in that triangle of chain link or mesh or whatever, and then you bring your camera up to your eye without moving, your camera is lower than your eye. You're looking through a prism and I mean through a mirror and all that. It's an inch or more below your eye. And when you're close to a chain link fence, that inch can be a real problem. So what you end up doing is you end up defocusing a bit. Make sure you see where you're really shooting and then refocus. And you can get a clear shot through the fence. But if you don't do that, you're liable to get this cross here right in front of your animal. Okay. So sometimes it's a glass barrier between you and the animals you want to photograph, and you've got to avoid glare. You've got to look for a shady spot or have somebody in dark clothing stand where they block the glare. You use a flexible lens hood. I have one for my macro lens that I can put right up against the glass without scratching anything and without causing a problem. If the glass is dirty, and it quite often is, because it's not exactly optical quality glass that holds the bears or the lizards in. So shoot wide open once again, and then zoom all the way in, because the longer the focal length, the less the dirt will show up on the glass. Get as close to the glass as you're allowed. It depends on kind of, where the glass is, and be a lot closer to the glass than the animal is, just like in fencing. So you can't get close to the glass with chimps. So as I said, one of the things I would do is I'd wait for an overcast day so I could shoot through the cleanest part of the window, but I couldn't get within 5 feet of that window. So I used my longest lens and, only shot the animals that were on the far side of the exhibit.
Are you saying that when you get close to the glass, the chimpanzees would react to you and change their behavior?
That plus there's a fence there to keep me from doing that. I mean, a rail.
A rail. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, they don't want you doing that. And on the other side, there's a now, if you want the perfect zoo to shoot chimpanzees, Los Angeles. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. They even have a viewing area where you can sit for hours and there's no fencing, there's a moat. And I guess I'm not showing you that picture because my wife disapproved of it, but I took a picture of a little chimp and he looked so comfortable and he looked so happy just sitting there staring at us. And when I got home, I found out the reason he was so comfortable is he was peeing. He just looked very relaxed and he was peeing, but I didn't see that in the video until I got home and I blew it up and it's like, oh, well, that's why he looked so relaxed. But yeah, there are places you can go that there are if you want to shoot gorillas, Disney's Animal Kingdom's a wonderful place. You shoot right over the fence and, lean on the fence for that matter, because you can get some really great shots. So you want to put your lens hood right, if you can, like these guys, that's a 4-inch thick glass with multi-layers. So you place your lens hood right up against it. You don't want to tilt it up or down or left or right, just right straight ahead. And so chances are you're going to shoot a little wide, right, a little loose, so that, you can then crop to get the animals in the right spot of the frame. But you just want to shoot directly through. No tilt, because that glass is not going to give you a good shot. And this is one of, I don't know, maybe half a dozen that I've got that are any decent out of 1,000 I've taken. Okay, so there's some animals you can get right up to the glass. That's my macro lens, and it's got a rubber lens hood on it. So with lizards and things like that, you can use off-camera flash just without getting a reflection. You just hold it way off to the side. And with any luck at all, if it's got like a screen over the top, you aim it at the ceiling. and bounce it down, and that's even better. That's a picture. That's a still from the video they shot of me doing the class on zootography. So actually, I'm lying. The top left and the top right were taken without glass in the way. I'll tell you that story in a second. But the other four, there's all glass, and I'm right up against the glass, and I'm using flash. And you don't see any reflection of flash back because the flash is, I don't know, a couple feet away. I got long arms. The top left, that's a leaf-tailed gecko. And the zookeeper came over and put him, he grabbed him off the ceiling and put them on a branch that was vertical. And I took the picture and I looked at it and I said, would you mind, if in post I turned it more horizontally, because these shots are going to be for your 42-inch monitors that are going to be above each display. And he looked at me like I was the devil incarnate and took the thing down and put it on in a place where I could get a picture horizontally. They don't like when you change the orientation of one of their animals. They're not amused.
So in the chat, Stephen, I asked if you can use speed light, or whether that you had special privileges maybe to use flash.
No, nobody. The only animal I've ever seen react to my speed light was the one in the top middle. Did not like it at all. So I took the one shot and stopped. Jumped. It's like, whoops, sorry. The others couldn't care less. So you might want to ask in the lizard area or the snake area if there's a problem, but you're not flashing at the animal. You are flashing away from the animal and bouncing that light back into the exhibit. Okay, so don't point it at the animal. Then I suppose that would be a problem. You might have to explain what you're doing to the zookeeper, saying I'm, pointing it away. Now there may be some really dark exhibits where the animals would not be amused, but I haven't run into any yet. So now that snake I'll show you later, and I'll warn you before it comes up full screen. Is there anyone here who's going to be bothered by that snake full screen? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So when we talk about it, we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, sometimes you have to wait. Just patience. Patience is the name of the game. So they had a litter of 3 warthogs, then they had a litter of 4. So the 3 were born a week before, and I got this top shot. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and I saw them walking like that, and finally I managed to catch them like that. And these other guys, 4 days I waited. The only reason I took this picture is so I could show how irritated I was. Because the top one, you see a face, and a face. On the bottom one, you see a face, a butt, and a butt, and a butt, It's like, no. That's the triplets were much friendlier than the quads. They treated me so much nicer. But it's a matter of patience. Most people go to the zoo and they run from exhibit to exhibit taking pictures. If you go often enough, it's okay to spend your whole day in front of the lions or your whole day in front of the zebra or whatever to get the shot you really want. This shot here, I kept seeing the giraffe go up and over the eland. And the eland has very, very sharp horns, and I kept wondering how safe that was. But they were buddies, they were raised together from babies, and this was just normal. And I was telling this story to the guys who were filming my class for me. They had a 2-man team videoing. And I'm telling the story, and all of a sudden, the eland comes and backs up under the giraffe, stands still in the back, and the eland backs up under it. I said, well, I have to have a photo of that. I got to show it to the zookeepers. And they love the story. But the more you know about your animals, the better a photographer you will become, the better a zootographer. But then the more you know about animals, the more you're going to be able to take better pictures in Africa or wherever you're going. You know, safaris are expensive. The Galapagos is expensive. Study the animals that you might be seeing. The more you know, the better. And of course, you know, if you have some free time, volunteer at the zoo. It's a great place to spend some time. Trading cards. Let's talk, you know, the zoo use those. These are a bunch, and this is from the first batch, and you'll see how there's this horrible design element going through the top of the animal. So I made a template with that design element built in and all that. So every photo I gave them from then on out did not have the head of the animal going, you know, it didn't have it going through the head of the animal. But as Joe McNally says, they'll just do whatever they want with your photos. So be prepared for that. The top one is a panorama. They had a budget. They were building a new area and they had a budget. And the company that they had a budget to make the signs asked the zoo if they had anybody in mind for the panorama. And I took the panorama, so I got paid. And they said, we want you to face directly west. So I did. And then they put the sign, "You are here," in the wrong place. So nothing was in the right place. The Oakland airport, where you can obviously see where it is on the picture when you see it all blown up, is off to the right in reality. The whole picture is in the wrong place. So like I said, I love to see the signs. With the elephants, the zoo's cheap. They're not going to spend a lot of money on signs, so these signs will be around a long time. In fact, Madonna Mella passed away, and so they just put an in memoriam sign right over it rather than take the sign down. I love it when they use it for banners, billboards, you know, it's an ego boost, okay? It's just fun to see your photos being used. And these barriers, they didn't do the greatest crop job on the one on the lower left, but oh well. But you know, whenever people aren't supposed to go a particular place, then they run into my pictures. And it has my name on it. Quite often they'll give me photo credit. Sometimes it's inappropriate, and I don't mind that they don't. It's just, you know, but sometimes when it's appropriate, they can do it. They use this is a Facebook banner that's up currently, and those three animals are all my shots. The gondola is a rendering, a drawing. It's not a photograph. Okay, so this was Instagram, I guess. Same here and here. Just Instagram shots, banners. Okay, so I moved to Prescott, Arizona, and I went in, I shot this picture, and Walgreens had free 8x10s that day. You could get one free 8x10. So I sent this one, had it printed, put it in a little black frame, took it to the zoo. It's now behind the cash register up on the wall in the gift shop. And it, along with some others, are on postcards that they're selling. Do I get a profit off of it? No, but you know, hey, I help the zoo. I don't donate as much of my money as I might otherwise if they can do that. So this one, remember the triplets? So Associated Press contacted the zoo and said, you got any pictures? So they sent them 3 of my shots and a link to my website. And Associated Press called me and said, you know, we really appreciate what the zoo gave us, but we like this photo better. Can we have it? It's like, sure. So this was my first internationally published picture. Let me tell you, there's days when the world needs good news, and 3 baby warthogs qualifies as good news for the New York Times, the London Daily Mail, someplace in Tokyo. I mean, it showed up for a while there. You Googled warthog and Stephen Gotz, and it was just everywhere. It was fun. Okay, So I'm taking photos of all of these different animals for the 42-inch monitors they're putting above each display. And this animal is up. It's a tree boa, an Amazon tree boa, and it's up at the top of a post, and I can't get to it. So I asked for help, and the zookeeper came around and said, "Come around the back." He grabbed it down. He wrapped it around a tree branch, or he gave it a tree branch to wrap itself around, facing me. So I've got my flash in my left hand, my camera in my right, and I turn, and he opens this door so I'm shooting without the glass. It's great. I mean, what an opportunity. I'm thrilled. And I asked him, I said, is it going to strike at me? And he goes, "Oh, no, no." And I take the picture and it strikes at me. And he laughs, "Ha ha, zookeeper humor." After I cleaned up, I'm glad I only had to clean off my lens and not my pants. But knowing it's not venomous really, really helped. But I love that photo for some reason. I don't know. And once again, these are some of my favorites. That's attitude. I'm not sure what the attitude is, but it's attitude. Yeah, I love the colors. This one was shot through glass. When I shot my video for the class, the two guys that were shooting the video got all excited over this one, and were right down there in the dirt, getting low and taking pictures with their phones and their cameras, and they were just having a good time. This guy's name is Hogan. Hogan is a black-throated monitor lizard. Not as big as a Komodo dragon, but, fun. That has got to be the ugliest bird I have ever seen in my life, and therefore I love this photograph. Have you ever seen an uglier bird? Have you ever seen an uglier animal in your entire life? This is a face not even a mother could love. It's one of the birds that's in The Lion King, the opening of The Lion King, when all the animals come to see when Simba is born. These are the ones with that long gular pouch as they fly. So he's called what do they call it? Not a mortuary bird.
It's a marabou stork, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a marabou stork, but they call it something because around from the back it looks like a mortician. Black coat.
He got his pants up way too high.
He does, really. And like I said, he's flipping me off. That's still one of my favorites. So this one they use all the time. When you're trying to explain to donors why it's expensive to feed elephants and they eat watermelons in one bite. Yeah, I actually bought that watermelon. It was a special day at the zoo where you bring all this fruit and you get to put it out there, and then you leave and the elephants come out and eat all, and they come out and that what looks like dampness on her cheek comes from a gland that they get excited either sexually or for food, and they smell so much fruit that they just get so excited that their gland leaks. And that's what's going on there. She's my favorite. Her name is Donna. And this is my buddy. His name is Luca. It should have been Lucha, but when they moved him to the San Diego, or to the LA Zoo rather, they messed up the name because luchar is Spanish for fight. And so he's supposed to be Lucha, but they named him Luca, and that's what he thinks his name is. So, oh well. When we got him, we had to keep it. There you go. I just love those eyes. Big bad wolf. Tell me where the story of the big bad. That's not a big bad wolf. That's just an adorable animal, isn't it? How can you tell a story of the big bad wolf when they look like that?
Big old puppy dog.
So this was the shot that I had been trying to get for years, and I finally got it. I must have 1,000 shots of flamingos with their beak tucked under, and I finally got it clean enough and clear enough to see the practically see through those feathers and how the grain is. I love this. It took me so long to get that shot, but it's one of my favorites. But see, that's the thing about a zoo is you can go back and shoot the same thing over and over and over again until you get it right. This is another one that they're using at the zoo. This is a lynx. No, excuse me. This is a bobcat. It's the cage over next from the Canadian lynx. Canadian lynx and bobcats are an awful lot alike. I did not realize until I took this picture that bison have striped tongues.
Huh.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
But they do. So I thought that makes it an interesting photo for me. That's a serval. His name is Frank, and he hisses at me every time I come. He does not like me. He doesn't like any people. He's just grumpy. But he was in his night house, and the sun was just such that it was just starting to come in the doorway to the night house. So that black behind him is natural. I didn't retouch it down. That's just the way it is. So that makes it. You know, I don't know if you'll get the same thing I do, but when an animal gives you a good picture, they become one of your favorite animals. Just sort of happens. So I'm sitting on a bench by the lions, and a little girl says to me, "What are those deer up there?" I go, "Oh, those are probably just local or something." And I realized that the animals that we never see, they never come down on this side of the hill to the elk, are standing looking at me, and just below where you can see, there's a chain link fence. So I stand up on the bench I'm sitting on, stretch my arms up high. I'm doing it with my hand. I tilt my screen down and I shoot this picture handheld, and he passed away shortly after that. And so when I was able to give this to the zoo, they were extremely, extremely grateful. They're both gone now, but that's the thing is if you can provide a zoo with pictures that they love, it's satisfying. So this one, that's a red-rumped agouti, and he lives in with the macaws. And he was also living in at the time with another very large bird who liked peanuts. And I've forgotten the name of the other bird right now, but we went in to shoot these guys, this guy and a couple of others, and we'd throw peanuts. And the marketing guy had his video camera and I had the still camera, and the other bird kept chasing him away because she wanted the peanuts. So finally we put a pile of peanuts for her, and then we were able to get the red-rumped agouti. So that's special privileges. When you get to go inside the exhibit, that's fun. So that's about it. I've talked for quite a while. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm not really good at keeping up with my social media, but I do have a webpage at artofzootography.com. I'm also on Facebook at Stephen Gotz Photography. And if you ever have any questions, you can let me know. Any questions now, by the way? Were there any in the chat that I missed?
I've got one. You mentioned the, using a monopod with that heavy lens. In my experience, there's a lot of places that will allow you to use a monopod where a tripod is not.
Right, absolutely. And I tell you what, are you familiar with platypod?
Yeah.
Okay, nobody ever questions the platypod. You stick them on trash cans, you stick them on boulders. Steve and I were out, and he had his platypod. He went up to go get his platypod and some neutral density filters. And I for the last over a year now, I haven't been feeling well, and that was the start of it. So he ran up and he got it. And then after he was done, he put it on this huge log that crossed the river. So he got his shot, then he loaned me the platypod. I took a picture of him using the platypod and sent it to Platypod in case they wanted to use it for anything. And then even more coincidentally, not only, obviously, you know, it's easy enough to borrow a tripod head, but it turned out that we had the same filter sizes. So I got to borrow his ND filters without running up to the car to get mine too. So good guy.
You had to do some calculating though. Then you saw me with the mirrorless and.
Oh yeah, that's not fair. Now I have a mirrorless now, and it has a built-in ND filter, but that's another issue. When you know, so here I am. I'm getting my shot all done, and then I put on, what was it, like 10 stops or something?
Yeah.
Doing the math, counting the stops so that I can, you know, then open up, you know, my shutter speed to as slow as possible. And he has a mirrorless where he just focuses right through, and what you see is what you get. And he's done in seconds, and I'm having to do math. Not fair.
So you said places where you can't use a tripod?
Oh yeah, there are zoos or parks or places where they're worried that somebody's gonna kick the leg, and they will. I mean, I used to carry my long lens around using a spider holster on my belt, or a spider holster belt, and I finally went to a cotton carrier up on my chest because little kids kept running into my camera and bonking their heads. And so with a tripod, you better keep your hand on it because there will be somebody kicking your tripod. And they just don't want the responsibility of anybody doing that there. And also in some places like, you know, churches or other buildings, they're afraid you're going to forget to unscrew the thing so that the rubber hits and not the pointy part. You're going to scratch their floor. But nobody ever questions really a monopod. They go, oh yeah, okay, fine. Now, years and years ago when I was doing video, I bought a thing that was like a monopod that goes in your belt, like a flag holder. Let me get rid of my thing here. I'm going to stop sharing because I'm still talking with my hands. So anyway, all right. So anyway, it's a thing where you can hold it like a flag, and it's springy, and so it never even hits the ground. And I took that all over Greece, and where it said no tripods, and nobody ever questioned it. But nobody ever questions the platypod, and it's flat and it sticks in your case. And the newest ones are even lighter than the oldest ones because I forget the name of it, but Extreme? Is that the name of the new ones? So I bought one of those because they're even lighter. And so you carry a little ball head with you. Not a big fancy one, a little ball head and a platypod. And it's got, you even have a little rubber thing on the bottom if you want. So if it makes people nervous that you're putting on a railing or something, oh yeah, but yeah, there are places you can't take, there's places you can't take a tripod, there's places you can't use a flash, you have to ask. Oh, and something I want to mention about photographs taken at a zoo. Some of them are well known and published. Adobe Stock will tell you which ones you absolutely cannot share your pictures. The San Diego Zoo, you cannot sell a picture. Now in Oakland, when I went to get a property release form from the marketing department, they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Well, what do you need that for? You took the picture. So yeah, just sign this. Just sign this because Adobe Stock's going to want proof that I have the right to sell a photo of one of their animals. But there are zoos that will not let you do that, so you have to ask.
And same with wildlife parks. When I was up in the Yukon, we could, if I spent the $1,000 for their tour, then I could sell it. But the $100 tour, they were like, you can take the picture, but you can't sell it. You could post it on social media, but you just can't sell it.
My
We
little
do have a.
Go ahead.
We do have a question here from Barbara about your favorite aperture. And I'm going to say 2.8.
Yeah, 2.8, or let's rephrase that, as low as it'll go. So my new camera goes from 5.6 to 6 point something. Let me talk about that real quick. I was a manual shooter. There was 2 months between the time I ordered my pre-release camera and I got it. I spent that 2 months studying as much as I could about photography, and the people I listened to online all said you have to shoot in full manual. So I did. Never have properly learned to use aperture mode or shutter mode. Anyway, so it has to be full manual. Well, at the zoo, I was always shooting wide open, and I was always shooting at the max range of the lens when I'm shooting through fencing. And I'm always shooting at 1 over the focal length. So the only thing that ever changed was what? My ISO. It's the only thing I ever changed. So what did I do? Well, I started using auto ISO, and I missed less shots because I didn't have to adjust anything. Now, I'm not saying that I don't have to go into exposure compensation and deal with that when I'm shooting a really white bird or something like that. But yeah, it's auto ISO is just fine for so many things. Not all the time, and certainly not in the studio. But yeah, so I try and shoot as wide open as possible. Now, having said that, when I'm shooting wolves or alligators or something that doesn't have a fence in the way, and it's a sunny day, and I've already got my shutter speed up around, the reciprocal or better. Oh yeah, well, I'll say, oh, this is great. I can go to, F8, as high as F16, and be very happy because I get the entire alligator, sharp, or the entire animal or of whatever it is now sharp. So it depends. But through fencing, like it or not, wide open. Without fencing, you shoot what's appropriate. And that's one of the differences between shooting in a zoo and shooting in the wild. In the wild, you choose everything the way you want it. In the zoo, you settle for what you've got to settle for. Anything else?
Any other questions? Going once, going
Okay.
twice.
So your principle is to not include fencing and trying to show no man-made.
Well,
You didn't show any.
if you're trying to shoot for stock, or if you're trying to shoot for the use of the zoo in the category number 1, which is animals looking like they're in their native habitat, my zoo in Oakland would not use a photograph with fencing. Why? Because it makes it look like the animals are in cages. Well, it's not a cage. It's a 6-acre area that happens to be surrounded by chain link fence. Well, but then again, when I'm shooting the zookeepers working through the fencing, well, yeah, then you have to. I mean, they're working through the fencing. They're feeding the animal through a fence. So yeah, you'll see the fence, but they won't use a picture on a trading card or a postcard or in the category where they're putting it, where they talk about all the animals at the zoo. No, for that, they don't want a chain link fence or any fencing of any kind. Just because I don't know if you guys ever watched that show, the Zoo, and they have the Bronx Zoo, and the opening statement is that when kids think about a zoo, they think about bars or fencing, and they're trying to change that attitude, which is why there's a lot more moats now. There's a lot more access. if you want to shoot giraffes, I didn't show you the picture. I've got a picture of a giraffe standing on a hill with a blue background with beautiful clouds. And it's in this huge savanna area at the Phoenix Zoo. It's like, we didn't have that in Oakland. You know, this is, those giraffes have room to actually run for like 3 minutes from one side to the other. It's a lot of room. So, but there's no fencing in the way. In fact, there's even a tower you can go up and shoot from.
Can I share a picture?
Sure.
You were talking about the Texas Wildlife Ranch earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That
Yeah.
is the Texas Wildlife Ranch. Oh, and my wife is seat belted into this photo, or into this seat right here.
I was, and then I was not.
You just put that seat back in a hurry, did you?
She got out of the way quick. But yeah, you can drive right up to the animals. There's a path, and they give you food to feed the animals.
Well, I went to one nearby where there were giraffes, and my first thought was, I have the wrong lens on. I'm not coming back here without 2 cameras and my 14 to 24 on one of them. Okay, because, but you know what you do is you grab your cell phone. By the way, before anybody disses cell phones, I want to say something. Cell phones have very small sensors. So everybody knows that the larger the sensor, the better you're going to be able to get a blur, right? You're going to be able to have separation from the background. But when you're shooting something a few feet away with a regular with your camera, I mean, the back of it's out of focus. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, heck, maybe his ears are out of focus, and you're at f/16. But with a cell phone, boy, the whole thing's in focus. If anything's in focus, it's all in focus. So I didn't show it to you, but I have a photo of a guy. He was trying to take a picture with his big DSLR. I forget what lens, but he wanted to shoot his daughter in his wife's arms with getting the gibbon in the background. And the gibbon was out of focus. You couldn't tell there was a gibbon back there. So I walked over and said, may I offer advice as the zoo photographer? And he said, sure. I said, use your cell phone. He said, what? I said, pull out your cell phone, take that picture. He took it. Everything was in focus. His wife, his daughter, the gibbon. He was so happy. Gear matters, but sometimes it's not the fancy gear that matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that, sometimes they get just a little too close. By the way, the solution to that, you want to know how I would have taken that picture? I would have zoomed in on its eye.
Oh, you're cute. You know what, sweetheart? That was me screaming, jumping out of my seatbelt into the back seat, and him turning from the driver's window to the passenger window and taking a picture right away. So when he says, let me get to the picture where you are not, I know exactly what he wants. He wants that picture because I was seatbelted into the car.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the picture is I have of a giraffe that got way too close. And I just have, it's an eye. It's a really clear eye, mind you, but it's just.
Yeah, I was feeding animals out the driver's side window, and that one snuck up behind her.
Well, are you at that park? Are you allowed to open your window?
Yes,
Sir.
they give you food, and you feed the animals when you drive through. And the animals
Good
know where the
dog.
food comes from.
Oh yeah, I imagine they do. But
That's
I
the
imagine.
wildlife branch.
Yeah, so I guess what you have to do is you just have to carry a really wide angle lens, 14 to 24, 24 to 70 maybe.
No, the passenger stays with the window rolled up.
Is that because you're the passenger?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mugged.
Now, my problem is now I have my own room in this new house. We just moved in a little over a month ago. I had it built, and now I have my own room. There are pictures my wife does not like. She does not like the snake. She does not like pictures of baby baboons. She thinks baby baboons are, I think they're adorable. She thinks they're horrible. So the wall that's next to the door, the wall you don't see when you're looking in the doorway, that's where those pictures are going to go. Where she can't see them unless she walks into my room and my office and looks at that wall, she's never going to see them. But my wife is very pleased. She put me a big collage together a couple of years ago of all the photos that the zoo had used. It was very cool. And yes, there's no fence in that picture of the zebra. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
I hope people enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was fun.
I will let you get back to any business you might have. Steve, we'll talk again. And thanks for inviting me. Take care,
Yeah.
folks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Our next speaker is November 17th. Who can tell us about that? It's Nikon.
Bill Button is arranging it. So,
Yeah.
And he's not here.
Okay, well, just know that we've got hooray, we've got a speaker already set up for November. And presumably the officers, well, we have our election in November. At some point, we're going to get some officers, I know, somehow. And also, we usually have a holiday social, or we'll see what we can do in terms of recognizing the people that all year took the best pictures, right, Ed and Stephen?
Yes.
So,
Sure.
So, yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm out. I gotta go to bed. I gotta be up at 4.
All right. Good night.
Hey, talk to y'all later.